Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand. Bread of heaven, feed me now and evermore. Feed me now and evermore.
Hello and welcome to Tea Time Theology. I'm Ivy Swinsky. Today's guest is the Canon Michael Horvah, and we will be talking about living in covenant. Michael, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start with your Bible quote and see where we go from there.
So my Bible quote is a little lengthy, but hang in there. Everyone knows it. It's a favorite, and it's certainly my favorite. So blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew chapter 5, verses 3 through 10.
Amazing. I really do enjoy the Beatitudes. I feel like there's something that I always forget about until like that Sunday pops up, and then suddenly you're like, oh my God, yeah, no, this is great. This is like an awesome thing that I always forget about. So there's like some flashier ones that get the attention instead.
Yeah.
But it's so wonderful. So my secular quote is the song Everywhere. So it's a nice like early 2000s throwback. And the lyrics are, "'Cause you're everywhere to me, and when I close my eyes, it's you I see. You're everything I know, and that makes me believe I'm not alone." And
Good.
I love that this song is just like a fun jam out song, but I felt like those lyrics really were part of what we're talking about here today, and this idea of living in a covenant with God, and what does that mean to us, and how do we do that?
Yeah, that is a wonderful song, and I'm excited about the topic.
Yeah, definitely. So let's dive right in. So what is a covenant? What does that mean to you when I use that word?
The first thing that comes to mind is relationship. It is, for me, a covenant is something that guides our relationship or relationships. So it can be between me and you. It can be between me and God. It can be between, all worshipers and God. So it's something that we establish as a base level. And we're not saying that we're meeting those base level promises all the time, but that we're aspiring to meet them. We're doing our best to get there. So if I'm talking about my covenant with God, or I'm talking about my relationship with God and what I understand God is asking me to do and to be in this world. I used to be a lawyer, and so there were always, and I was a transactional lawyer, and there was always a set of paragraphs in a contract that were, covenants. And I remember just thinking, as I was either creating them, writing them out, or I was reviewing them, I just kept thinking, what is really going to make this this relationship between my client and this other party really mutually beneficial, right? And I think that's something that we forget about what a covenant is that I think it really needs to be mutually beneficial. It's not a contract of adhesion where, these are the rules. If you don't stick by them, that's it. There's always room to figure out new ways of being I think, in a covenant. And so it's both a set of guidelines that lay a framework, but it's also a very flexible framework, right? That should allow for some growth and for some reflection into our relationship.
I love that. The two examples that came into my mind with covenant
Yeah.
are, I don't know if in like your life and work you do a lot of like group trainings, and I
Yeah.
feel like you always start them with those group norms, which I personally
Yeah.
find so tedious. Like, I understand conceptually why they're so important, but I'm like, yeah, we know not to be mean to each other. We're all at the same conference. Like, we're kind of like base level at the same level. And a lot of times they call them either group norms or like the group's covenant, which I always find so interesting, because I feel like covenant, the word itself, has sort of taken on this like very biblical aspect to it. Like, I feel like you can hear people use the word like relationship. That's something that is in like our everyday dialogue, but the word covenant is like this elevated sort of idea. So I love that you brought it down and you're like, no, this is really what it is.
Yeah. Do you know Brene Brown? She's she's a researcher and a really kind of big author. You may like classify her as a self-help author, but she is an Episcopalian and she's written some amazing books. Like Dare to Lead is one that I've just recently read, and in it she talks about group dynamics and how when you're coming together as a group to really talk and work through some really difficult things that it hopefully will be transformative to whatever organization you're in, that you're also bringing in your baggage, right? You're bringing in your sense of shame and worth, your sense of who you are. And so what she has suggested, and another way of saying these like group norms, or titling these group norms, is she calls them rules of rumbling, because the work is so important that it can also be it can not only bring out the best in us, but sometimes the worst in us. Yeah. And I've had an experience lately where I'm working with a group now that it's the first time that they're really starting to come together to talk about things in a really deep, in a really deep way, in a really vulnerable way. And so we really had to go through those norms a few times, and still today, I had one of the group members say, I feel like I'm a 12-year-old being told how to act. And that for me said two things. One, the way I was trying to describe it to him was not working. So there was a communication lag on my part. And the other thing is that it made me realize how important actually it is to have those rules of rumbling in place, because again, he's coming to this gathering with a sense of himself that it could both be very constructive for the group, but also potentially very damaging.
With this idea we've sort of established of what a covenant is, what do you think is the difference between a covenant that is living and breathing and continuous versus something that's like, because you said you are, or were a lawyer, you don't really stop that, but what are sort of the difference between something like a covenant that is quick versus something that is living and breathing and evolving and changing?
Well, go to your group norms, right? A typical group norm might be, let's not deny somebody's basic experience of something, right? By saying, oh no, you should have felt this way. Let's not tell other people how to feel. Well, that could mean a lot of things, right? That could be verbally telling somebody, hey, you really shouldn't feel like that, or you view that the wrong way, and blah, blah, blah. But it can also mean body language. Like if you're turning away from somebody, if you're not able to look at them in the eye, if you're rolling your eyes. So, that's something where there's kind of a base norm, but what's captured in that norm. And also, so if I'm talking about my covenant of being in relationship with my congregation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That means that they can expect me to act in certain ways, or to strive to act in certain ways, but that there's also room to allow me to be human in the event that I'm just having an off day, or if I flub something up in the liturgy, or if I didn't know that somebody had a pastoral need because I wasn't made aware of it, um, and now they're angry at me. Some of these things are just part and parcel of being human, and a covenant, as I understand it, says, listen, these are what we're trying to achieve, but let's give each other a sense of grace and a sense of mercy and a sense of compassion to allow us to kind of live into these covenantal norms and covenantal promises. So that to me is probably how I think of a covenant as being organic, is that it's less looking at the four corners of the document and saying, this is, well, you didn't do this. It's being able to say, you didn't do this, but you know what? Life is life, and shit happens, and so we need to kind of allow for that in good ways. We don't need to be enablers, certainly, but we can certainly model out for each other what it means to have a sense of grace and to have a sense of mercy and compassion.
How do you think we live by that moral code? I may be jumping to like a second question here without acknowledging what that first sort of covenant we'll go back.
Yeah.
What covenant do you think we have with God as people? The big question.
What covenant do we have with God as people, as God's beloved, right? Mm-hmm. So I understand my covenant with God to be to love God, to praise and thank God for the mercy and grace that God extends to me. At the same time, it has to flow then directly out of me towards those whom I'm in a relationship with and into this world that I live in. So it is my covenant with God is to have that relationship with God, which I nurture and which I take time to explore, to understand God and to understand myself within that relationship, but also to understand my God through my relationship with others. Those are the real two big things. And there are all of these kind of sub ideas, like bringing forth the good news and sharing that, and really having people understand it as a really vital living part of what it means to be a Christian, right? It's not just something that's pasted inside our baptismal covenant in the Book of Common Prayer, but it's an active and living thing that we need to kind of grapple with on a day-to-day basis, on an individual to individual basis. And once we stop grappling with it, then it just becomes a document that you may as well file away, because it's kind of dead to you. So
I love the baptismal covenant. I think it's like this beautiful poetic sort of idea that we all live by, but I love what it ends with you are marked as Christ's own forever. Like that sort of idea that no matter what you do, there's no like opt out. Like this is it. Like we've made this choice. We're here. We're doing this. Even if your life takes as many turns as lives usually do, there's not like an eject button on this plane. Like we're just on it.
Yeah. And what's amazing, I love that, and thank you for raising that, because that idea is not ours alone as Christians. I mean, even Jews say, once a Jew, always a Jew. Like you will always be a part of the tribe, no matter where you go. It's also true of the Muslim religion. I think for me, it provides a sense of place. It provides a sense of belonging, and it actually really focuses me on the importance of to whom I belong, right? It's not belonging to everybody else in this world. It's really trying to figure out how I live out my belonging as the beloved of Christ. And so I think that's really important. And I think you really hit on something important that we don't often reflect on, which we should, because it feeds right into the ideas of grace and mercy, right? That knowing that we're human, we're going to royally screw things up, but we're not going to get kicked out of the bar. I mean, it's still we're not going to get bounced out. We still can learn from that situation and grow.
I'm going to go back to the second question then.
Yeah.
How do we live by that covenant if we know that we're not going to get kicked out of the bar, as you said? How do we live our life in that sort of way?
It takes work. And I think that's where spirituality comes into play, right? And so if we're talking about religion, we're talking about norms of belief and practices that allow us to come together as a group with the same objective of praising and thanking God. But then spirituality asks us to kind of take that environment where hopefully we're given the tools to then practice it on our own, to understand what our relationship is with God, and to figure out for ourselves how does that relationship take on bigger meaning in my life. And if we reflect on that, then I think one of the conclusions that we hopefully come to, at least I've come to, is that being is not the same as doing. And so I can, again, read our baptismal covenant every morning, but if I'm not actually living it, then it's not doing its job, and I'm not doing my job, or I'm not living into the fullness of God's beloved. So that means being in relationship with people, first and foremost for me, even with those who are difficult to be in relationship with, and with those who find it difficult to be in relationship with me. Mm-hmm. So it's always going back to it's always trying to find that common ground with people. When people say that they're just spiritual but not religious, I think you really kind of miss out on being able to share in the fruits of your own growth with God, right? If I am so focused on my spirituality, hopefully I'm growing in ways that my heart is filled with the love of God, and the reality of that is that it should be overflowing such that you can't contain it. Like you really have to share it with people for it to make a 360. So that is, I think that's for me the key to living out that covenant, is to always seek ways to find to be in relationship with people.
What do you think the difference is between spirituality and religion?
So, well, I mean, religion is, like I said, it's kind of a set of beliefs and practices that a group has agreed to over, however, 2,000 plus years in terms of Christians. And that provide us with a framework of understanding our faith. It provides us with a framework of worshiping and praising God. It provides us with the arena to interact with others who are seeking or have that same sense of faith, so that we can kind of bounce off ideas. Like, am I thinking about my relationship in kind of nurturing, growing ways, or am I totally off the tracks, right? And being in a congregation or being with a group of people who gather to pray allows us to kind of to do that. Also, religion actually allows me to deliberately try to engage the God being in someone else, right? Because if I'm not getting off my sofa after praying for 15 hours or whatever, just to ramp up my spiritual side, if I'm not getting off of my sofa and actually kind of trying to bring that sense of me to others and to also gain a sense of God in them, then it's not full. It's not a full life of faith in my experience. Spirituality is those practices that allow me to connect with God in ways that that hopefully are transformative, and they can take on. And I think that's where we can get a little bit more creative, right? I do a lot of mindfulness meditation. Sometimes I will use the Jewish siddur and pray the prayers there because they speak to me at some point. And I think that a lot of folks do that. I mean, that's why syncretism was just so prevalent, right? So when the colonists came to Mexico, if you look at their Roman Catholic religion, it is just imbued with local spirituality that existed before the Roman Catholics arrived. And some of that has kind of taken on the Roman Catholicism and added its own flavor into it. So yeah, I mean, spirituality, technically is, I think, a sense of my own seeking of God.
Do you think you can have religion without spirituality? Like, they have to work hand in hand with each other?
I think so. I am loath to look into the hearts of people when they come to church on a Sunday, but that's kind of, they come in, they do their prayers, and they're gone, because I'm usually interested, and I'll say, so tell me about your spiritual life, tell me about your prayer life at home. But for some people, they come to church because it's where they find a sense of community, and it may not be their entry point into a full life of spiritual practice and being, but it allows them, for whatever reason, to have a community in which, whether they can articulate this or not, they're able to experience, hopefully, God in the numbers around them. And so I think that's why it's so important to even come if you're not feeling particularly prayerful, if you're questioning your belief, if you have no sense of belief, come to the table, come to church, because it's a community, and we're first and foremost, I think, seeing God when we are able to be in community with one another. I don't think their spirituality and religion is mutually exclusive to one another, and in fact, I would argue that they're necessary for one another. But they're balanced, right? I think sometimes in my life, I feel sometimes religiously dry, where I feel sometimes like I'm just going through, the motions, right? And hopefully a lot of priests will tell you this, but Sunday, it is sometimes difficult to feel a deep sense of spirituality when you're up at the altar, kind of doing what I'm doing. But then there are some other times when I'm up at the altar for the Eucharist, and I'm just ready to cry because I'm just so filled, and that's the same truth on the spiritual side of my life. Sometimes my prayer life is really rich, and sometimes it's just as dry as a bone. And when it's dry as a bone on the spiritual side, that's for whatever reason, when I feel most fed by the religion side,
Mm.
right? And then vice versa. So I think that they're really complementary.
Yeah. A little like side tangent, but do you have any like prayer spirituality hacks? I feel like there's always various things of like, this is one way you can pray and that sort of thing. So do you have any sort of hacks for us that we can sort of use in our life that works for you or anything like that?
Yeah. So I think the hack that I've really been enjoying is, especially because of all the time that we've had, is is you can actually go on YouTube and there are just some wonderful folks who are praying on there, and it's just you just log on to somebody's prayer group, right? And just sometimes you need to be carried by prayer, by someone else's prayer when you're feeling kind of dry and in the desert. So that's always kind of a good thing. It's just, and I still do it myself. A few churches I know are doing morning prayer by Facebook Live. I'll just log on to their Facebook Live sometimes. So I guess that hack, if we want to name it, is don't be afraid to ride on somebody's prayer coattails, right? Because sometimes you need that that little bit of help. I love what am I loving lately? I am loving so all right, this will sound really self-centered, but one of the things that I've loved doing since we're in place is I started making my own pour over coffee. So I used to use a coffee press.
Okay.
So I got, super fancy. Like I got this Chemex coffee maker. I got this gooseneck kettle, and in the morning, from start to finish, it takes about 10, 12 minutes to make a cup of coffee. But it is so prayerful because I've got to wait for the water to boil. I've got to fold the filter that goes into this special doodad thing. And then I've got to temper the coffee carafe. Then I've got to grind the beans. And so the hack of finding prayer in the most simple and mundane things is a wonderful hack to nurture, because we're always doing mundane things, right?
Yeah.
I don't know anybody yet who has sustained a level of fabulosity that they're just like always doing these great things. So doing it when you're cleaning the bathroom, folding your clothes, there's always time for prayer.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like a lot of the activities you're saying are ones that are sort of repetitive and almost have a meditation sort of feel to them. There are a certain number of steps and you have to do them in order, but you don't really have to think about them.
Yeah. So before I got really involved in church again after many years of being out, I practiced Zen Buddhism for many years. And the essence of that I took away from that practice is, again, what I've just said, it's the holy in the mundane. So sweeping your floors, the repetitive action of sweeping, it can be transcendent if you're in the mindset to receive that. So yeah, I totally agree. It's that repetitive, but it's also part of our Episcopal culture, right? Lex orandi, lex credendi, which is pray. Praying is believing. We have a Book of Common Prayer to allow us to pray the same prayers over and over again, because for whatever reason, and through whatever mechanism, God is breaking through in that, through either a sense of comfort or through a sense of belonging or space in this world. So there is something that's it's very holy about repetition.
Yeah, I personally really love our prayer book. I love that sort of repetition. I was very involved in my church growing up, and like was there 3 days a week on like a low week. So I was just always in that sort of idea. And when I went to college, I like didn't really go to any sort of churches just because like I was working on Sundays or I had something else happening. But what I loved, I went to school in New York, was I could walk into almost any church in New York, any Episcopal church, and the service would be the same as what it would be at home. It would be the same sort of system. Yeah. And I find something very comforting in them. I have a lot of other friends who don't like that kind of repetition and they want every church service to be different. But I think that there's something very like comfort food like about our prayer book. And it's one of my favorite things about the Episcopal Church and sort of like one of our legs that we stand on.
Yeah, definitely. You know, and I think we also can see the downside of that right now in what we're going through, because there are a lot of people for whom, a regular income was very, the regularity of an income, the regularity of food. And now there are all these people who are just kind of upended. So their sense of peace, of well-being, it's not there. And so how do we muster up our own sense of continuity and grace and well-being in ways that we can share with folks who are in those positions? And I think that's why so many people are starting to show up on our virtual services, right? Because we've got folks from not even in Rhode Island who show up on our virtual services, because there's that sense of everything else is so topsy-turvy in my life. Everything is kind of flipped over. But I suspect in their minds they're thinking, but God is still the same, and God still loves me, hopefully. And so that's something that's deep rooted. So.
No, definitely. I have been going to church more consistently and to more churches since the whole social distancing thing, because my mom and I will do we'll watch one service, but we'll do like 3 sermons in a day. We'll be like, we'll just like go to and see what their sermon is.
Oh yeah.
And we're like church shopping. Not that either of us are going to change our churches, but it's like, they had a really cool viewpoint on that I wouldn't have gotten in my own church. And that's something I personally really love, is like churches working together. And like my aunt went to a ordination in North Carolina. We don't know anyone in North Carolina, but it was on Facebook, and it's like, why not show these people support? So I do think that is a very interesting sort of outcome of this.
I think change is awesome. Experiencing change is awesome, and this is a perfect time to do it. And so I came up through the Diocese of New York, and I was in New York City for many years, and when I graduated from seminary, I was like, all right, so what would be something really exciting, right? And so I thought, because the two jobs that were available when I graduated in the diocese weren't very interesting to me. And so the Canon to the Ordinary of the Diocese of Texas came out to my seminary, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll talk with her. She was interviewing students. And so we were talking about the diocese, and she was telling me, she was like, well, it's kind of low church, and everything that I had done in New York City was almost Anglo-Catholic, but it was pretty high church. And and so I had this perception that Texas was going to be like snake belly low church, right? But when I got out there, it was fairly low, but I just loved it, because it was such a new way of experiencing God and experiencing people's relationship. Like my whole time in the Northeast, it's kind of rare for people to talk about a relationship with Jesus in a kind of close, personal, meaningful way. You know, we tend to shroud it around like the Holy Spirit or the divine presence or something like. But you know, Southerners are very much into Jesus loves you. Do you have a personal relationship with Jesus? And it's a frankness that that I really appreciated and that really resonated with me. And so it changed my relationship with God. So those periods when you can experience change on your own terms, like nobody wants to experience change when they're forced to, right, in a really bad situation.
Yeah.
It's difficult. But if you kind of can see the goodness of it, and if you can see the opportunities within it, that where God is calling you, or where God is trying to work God's way deeper into you, then it becomes transformative.
Yeah. My sister has a saying called Jesus calls collect. And that sort of idea of like the holiness of just saying yes and being like, I don't really know how this is going to go, but what do I have to lose in this moment with that?
Yeah. Have you experienced that yet? Have you done something like that yet?
I think a lot of so I graduated in 2018.
Uh-huh. Where did you go?
I went to Marymount Manhattan College. It's a
on 70, what is it? Is it
71st and
71st?
Yes.
Yeah, for 1 year I lived on 71st and First.
Oh wow, you
I
were
would pass that
like
school all the time.
Next door to us. I'm so sorry if we were like loud or anything.
I had one student who lived across the hall from me in my apartment building, and I swear, like at 5 o'clock, no, it was like around 6 o'clock every night, it would just like smell like pot, like, and it would like seep right into my apartment. But he was the nicest guy though.
Yeah, no, nothing about that story surprises me.
Yeah.
Definitely. But yeah, so when I graduated school, I sort of just said yes to a lot of jobs, and things sort of spiraled in a really wonderful, beautiful way. And I was getting work. My degree is in playwriting and costume design, so getting work in that is just an exciting baseline. But it was wonderful. And then I moved home in August of 2019 for like a variety of reasons that everyone moves. So I think it's been very exciting to sort of figure out who I am here and what sort of yeses I want to say in Rhode Island Ivy versus New York Ivy.
Yeah.
Sense.
I think that it's so exciting. You know, I'm kind of envious. That's so exciting. It's a good position. You know, I think that when you can be living in a state of curiosity, it really opens things up. And I think that's one of the things that I really try to work on with my congregation, is that, because, you know, being one of the 4 colonial churches, you know, we've got this like history that is a blessing and a burden. The usual answers are, well, we've done it this way for 300 years, or whatever. You know, just kind of asking questions, you know, so I'm curious, you know, what would this look like if we did this? Or I'm curious, why is that old piece of something sitting in the corner of the church? You know, and sometimes the answers are really interesting, but sometimes sometimes new ideas pop up. Yeah. And I think that's really the Holy Spirit, right? That's where if we're not being curious, if we're not putting ourselves in a position to even think about saying yes to the unknown, then we're really not kind of letting the Holy Spirit do the work that she's supposed to do and help us with.
No, absolutely.
So I love that you are. And look, you know, like would you in your wildest dreams have thought that you were like kind of talking to, interviewing a crazy rector. It's like,
No.
probably not.
I feel like this whole podcast is a very holy. Yes, a lot of things fell into place really beautifully to even make this happen. So I definitely feel you on that. And your church is stunning. I was part of choirs when I was growing up, and we would sing even songs there. But I think there is something very interesting about the Episcopal Church in Rhode Island, but in New England as well. And I would even include New York in it, that we are in these very structured buildings in a way. And that sort of leans into, well, this is how it's always been done sort of idea. And the most successful churches, I think, are the ones that are like, this is how it's always been done, but why not do something else? Like, if you look at the prayer book, there really are not that many directions. It's really just what you have to say. It's not really anything.
There are a lot of may rubrics, right? So, the officiant may do this, but it's not there are more of those than I think that there are must or shall.
Yes, definitely.
I think that one of the questions that I always ask wherever I go to people in their churches is, who would you all be if your church burned down to the ground? And that's the look of horror and the inability to kind of think through that at first is a little off-putting, because maybe I'm not going to be able to help them see a bigger sense or vision of themselves. But once you start kind of working with the narratives that they've been working with, and understanding that there's a deep love of God that eventually supersedes all of the, kind of the BS parts. Not saying that my BS, but but let's be honest. Let's really prioritize. And I'm not here to run a museum, and hopefully people don't attend a church to worship their ancestors. So again, it's that idea of staying open and curious and wanting to say yes to God that I think can really take us, and actually the larger church, into really big and exciting areas, new areas. I am a little envious sometimes when I talk to my friends who are church planting. I mean, church planting is just, there's something really appealing to it, because you're really starting with nothing other than the Holy Spirit. And sometimes we forget that that's all we have is God and how God leads us. And we get mired down in the forms of what it means to be a Christian, rather than the functionality of what it means to be a Christian.
So we are kind of coming towards the end of our time together. Is there any sort of last thoughts that you're like, I cannot do an episode called Living in Covenant without saying X?
Yes. There are two words and two ideas that we should never, ever be afraid of if we are to call ourselves followers of Christ. One is discipleship, and the second is evangelism. To really be a follower of Christ, it means putting ourselves in the posture of being a disciple. The meme of what would Jesus do is it's real. Like, that is kind of the level of following that I think we're asked to do. Then the second is evangelism. Are we sharing through our words and actions the good news that is promised to us? Because that's what we're really called to do. And I think if we're living that way, then wow, I mean, we are just kind of unstoppable. Like, love is really unstoppable. So, and I've run across a lot of people for whom those two words are redolent of Baptist Bible Belt
Yeah.
terminology, right? So there's a lot of baggage but it's time for us to reclaim those words in a big, meaningful way, because I think it undergirds what and how our life in Christ should be like, which in turn undergirds what and how our life with each other should be like. So thanks for letting me get that out.
Yes, definitely. So I know right now we can't be in person with each other, but if we wanted to see you on a Sunday, how could we do that?
You can always contact me or contact the church, and we'll send you a Zoom link to our Sunday service. But every night on Facebook Live, at 8 p.m., we have Compline, and it's just not my face. It's not just my talking head. We have a lot of lay folks who are leading it as well. So that's something that I love. And they invite their friends, and then their friends invite their friends, and we get a lot of folks. So it's a lot of fun.
Great.
Those are the two ways. But now that we're thinking about this kind of phased reopening, we're hopefully also going to start streaming our services directly onto our webpage. That's to come. So it's a work in progress.
Yeah. And what church are you at exactly?
St. Michael's Episcopal Church in Bristol, Rhode Island.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Ivy. I can't wait to meet you in person. We'll have a lot to chat about.
Definitely.
A lot of good New York stories.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you for listening to Tea Time Theology. We would like to thank our sponsor, the Episcopal Diocese of Rhode Island, and the Right Reverend Nicholas Knisley, as well as our guests today. You can follow us at Tea Time Theology on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. This season of Tea Time Theology is hosted and organized by Ivy Swinsky. Our music is mixed and performed by Mo Ray Akande. The podcast is recorded and edited by me, Taylor Wilkie.
Open now the crystal fountain, whence the